Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 192, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, November 13th, 2023. Good to be back. Sorry, I missed you all last week. I did say on the one episode that came out that may be the case. I was hoping to have some time to at least get a quick election update out, but just a wild week. I'll go over that here in a moment. Things should be back to normal this week, with your typical episodes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I appreciate all of your understanding. Yes, very busy week last week. Some good things, of course. So that's a plus. Thankfully, it wasn't anything bad. Had a lot of fun. The big news, it may be live today when you're listening to this, depending on when, but the plan is this week by Tuesday at the latest to have a brand new holycitycenter.com up and running. Switched over to a new platform. There'll be a new design. I'm sure it'll take a little getting used to for those of you who visit the site frequently. Some things have moved or changed a little bit, but I think in the long run, it's going to be a much better site. Just more stories to display, and I think it'll look nicer. I've always enjoyed the simplicity of my site, and I don't think this will change that too much, but I just think it'll look a little better. But I appreciate any and all feedback if you head over there and, once it is live, if you notice anything's not working, or even if you just really like everything, I appreciate any and all feedback. It's part of a bigger project that I will be talking about later. This was the first step, launching this new website design, and we'll talk more about what else is coming on a later episode. So in addition to preparing for that, which, without getting too into the weeds for you, has involved some double posting, basically. I've had to, update my site as normal, but also get these same posts have to be on the new site when it launches. And since it's a whole new program, I've had to, save it to this temporary site as well as a new site. I also had a company help convert old posts over to this new system, but that also involved a lot of work, especially for them. I'm thankful they were able to do it. But on my end, I also had to add categories to all these old posts, and there's a lot of work still to be done. So that's kept me really busy. And adding to that was, I had, long before I knew what that last week was going to be, I had bought tickets to some shows, and I went to 3 different concerts on 3 straight days in 3 different cities. And no, I'm not talking Charleston to Mount Pleasant to North Charleston. It was downtown Charleston, next day to Savannah, Georgia, and the next day to Greenville, South Carolina. So a lot of traveling at the beginning of the week, which also took away from being able to do the podcast and all those types of things. So real quick, on Monday, I went to the Music Farm, really enjoying that updated venue, which, I've been to several times over the last year plus, really enjoying it. And the show I went to was like a pop punk emo kind of lineup. A band called Armor for Sleep was a headliner the early November, who I was most excited to see, as I used to listen to them a lot. And then the Spill Canvas opened the show, another band I listened to a good amount back in college. Everyone was good. I actually left before Armor for Sleep finished. A friend of mine came with me. We were both really there for the first 2 bands, so we didn't stay the entire time, but it was good catching up with my friend, and the sets that we were there for were both really good. Early November, we're celebrating a 20th anniversary of what's probably their most popular album. And so that was a lot of fun, too. So enjoyed it. The crowd was great. A lot of people around my age. You never know with these shows, how many people who are a little bit younger are discovering these bands now that I listened to 20 years ago or so. But yeah, it was mostly people around my age. So although, there was still some people up front, not quite a mosh pit or anything. Not that I want anything to do with that. I like to hang out in the back. Those days are long gone of trying to get really close if there's going to be kind of a crush of people, but they were into it, and it was a lot of fun. Next 2 days, I went to go see the Dave Matthews Band. I've talked about numerous times, my favorite band. Yes, I know some of you don't like them a lot. It's okay, but yes, I went to go see them in Savannah at Enmark Arena, which is a newer space. And a really nice venue. Show was great. Went with a friend of mine. Had a lot of fun. The next day, went up to Greenville to see them. Again, just a fun show. Had a lot of fun. Nothing really exciting to report back, but that was my busy, fun week last week. And then, from Thursday until who knows how many more days, I'll be working on this new site and getting things up and running. So didn't do anything else the rest of the week, but a very busy start. So I was happy to have some days to just kind of do work and relax at home. So that's what the delay was about. Not a delay, but that's why there was no episodes last week besides the one on Tuesday. It was just too crazy for me. So again, appreciate the understanding. So this episode, most of it's going to be about the elections that happened. I have some information about the runoff that's coming up for a few of those. So certainly some important information that you may have missed. Outside of the election talk, there is one other story that I'll be covering. And I do want to make a note that the Charleston Battery are on Sunday played in the championship game of their league, the USL. And I don't, obviously I'm recording this on Sunday. You're hearing it Monday or after, so I won't be able to tell you what happened. Hopefully it was a Charleston Battery victory and they took home the title. But I'll be sure to update on the next podcast in case you miss it. But looking forward to that game tonight, and hopefully they'll come home victorious. All right, let's get into the news. We've got election updates. The big one, of course, is the Charleston mayoral election. It is heading to a runoff. Charleston Mayor John Tecklenburg will go up against former Republican State Representative William Cogswell on November 21st. Those two moved on after a six-way race, which resulted in Cogswell actually outpolling Tecklenburg by 1,227 votes. The reason it goes to a runoff and Cogswell isn't the winner is because no candidate got 50% of the vote. So you have to get at least 50%. If that doesn't happen, the top two vote getters move on. Now, in this, because there's only two, one of them will have to have over 50% of the vote, unless there's some ridiculous tie scenario. But that's what we'll be looking at. The winner will obviously become mayor of Charleston, or in Tecklenburg's case, earn re-election. So we'll see what happens there. If you're wondering, about 30,758 votes total were cast for Charleston mayoral election. In the unofficial results, Cogswell got about 11,151 votes, which is 36.2% of the vote, while Tecklenburg went just shy of 10,000 votes for 32.3%. So both well under that threshold, as I mentioned. For other candidates, if you're wondering, the percentage points that they got, Clay Middleton was third with 18%. Peter Shade with 8%, Mika Gatson with 3.5%, and Deborah Gammons had 1.5%. Meanwhile, in some other races, Democratic State Representative Dion Tedder of North Charleston had a pretty easy victory in a special state Senate race. He got 82% of the votes, beating out newcomer to the GOP, Rosa Kay. In North Charleston, former police chief Reggie Burris easily won a 10-way race for mayor. He will replace outgoing Mayor Keith Summey, who had recommended that people vote for Burgess. Summey, of course, announced that he was retiring and was not one of the folks was not one of the 10 people on the ballot. In Charleston, 6 of the 12 city council seats were also up for grabs. The 4 incumbents running for re-election all won. That includes city council veteran Keith Waring, who beat out Owen Vogel by capturing 69% of the vote for District 7. Over in District 5, incumbent Carl Brady had a little bit close victory. And that district is over in West Ashley. He got 50.4% of the votes in a 3-way contest. So he just hit that 50% threshold, avoiding a runoff. And then some folks wrapping up their first term, Boyd Gregg in District 1 on Daniel Island, and Ross Appel in West Ashley's District 11 also won their races, obviously being unopposed in theirs. That was a wrapped up conclusion weeks ago. So that's that portion. Meanwhile, we had some open seats. District 3, which is that new district created and is on Johns Island. This really demonstrates how important voting is, especially in down ballot races. I know these aren't necessarily the sexy races of president or mayor or governor or whatever, but it was so close to being a runoff. It was avoided by 1 vote. Jim McBride got 50.03%. If there was just one less vote in his favor, it would have gone to a runoff. Only 1,481 people voted in that race. Second place was Stephanie Hodges. She got 45.8% of the vote. And then there was a third candidate, Bill Antonucci. He got just 4.1%. So it could have gone to a runoff. So again, it just shows that you really need to vote in these down ballot races. One vote, it could have gone to a runoff. McBride was one of the folks that supposedly was endorsed by Moms for Liberty. And because people decided not to get out there and vote, they are now going to be on Charleston City Council. In District 9, there was a five-way race with William Tinkler coming out on top with 39.9% of the vote, but because, again, it didn't hit that 50% threshold, he's going to go into a runoff with Mike Gadsden, who was in second place with 26.6%. So that will be also going to a runoff election. If the name Tinkler sounds familiar, it's because William's father, Paul, actually held the West Ashley seat several years ago. I'll have some more information on the runoff elections in a moment, but the next section has to do with some of the other ballot questions that some voters faced. So, sometimes when there's elections, it's not just, who do you want to be in this office? It also includes things like referendums, and other decisions that voters have to vote on. So one of those was for the city of Charleston, and voters overwhelmingly approved a plan to make some capital improvements and renovations at parks and recreation facilities across the Holy City. The $70 million bond referendum passed by a margin of 80% to 20%, according to unofficial results from the South Carolina Election Commission. The referendum will fund upgrades to the W.L. Stevens Aquatic Center at Forest Park over in West Ashley, construction of a new recreation center and aquatics facility on Johns Island, and renovations to McMahon Playground and Corinne Jones Playground on the peninsula. There's some other projects that will also benefit from this new referendum. According to officials, taxpayers will see about a 2% millage increase on property taxes to help pay off that bond. Meanwhile, in James Island, voters decided on a measure that would change the town council from a 4-member governing body to a 6-member one. And that measure was also approved by a wide margin, with about 66% of the voters saying that they wanted that expansion. Those 2 new positions will be filled during the next municipal election in November of 2025. Over on the Isle of Palms, voters rejected a measure that would limit short-term rentals on the island. The referendum was placed on the ballot after City Council received a petition signed by more than 1,200 residents who were calling for the adoption of an ordinance that capped the number of short-term rental licenses to 1,600 for non-primary residents. The unofficial results show that voters rejected that measure, but it was pretty slim margin, 54.5% to 45.5%. Now, what do you need to know for the runoff election? If one of the races that you are eligible to vote for, so, if you voted for mayor of Charleston, that's in a runoff. If you were in the District 9, with William Tinkler and Mike Gadsden, that is also going to a runoff. By the way, Gadsden is another one of the candidates that was recommended by Moms for Liberty. So if you're in District 9, Gadsden, Moms for Liberty, recommended. So keep that in mind and maybe cast your vote for William Tinkler instead. So those are the 2 big ones. That runoff election will be on Tuesday, November 21st. Any eligible voter, including those that did not vote on November 7th. So if you skipped it for whatever reason, you can still vote. It doesn't matter. You can go to these runoff elections and cast a ballot. Now, there is a few different ways you can do it. There's early voting. And so for any of those runoff elections, you can early vote from November 15th through the 17th at the Board of Voter Registration headquarters, which is at 4340 Corporate Road in North Charleston. Early voting hours are 8:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. each day. Residents who voted absentee on November 7th and who requested an absentee ballot in the event of a runoff will be mailed a runoff ballot. Now, if you didn't request that ballot, that means you would have to, do either early voting or in-person voting on the actual election day itself. If you do receive that absentee ballot, it must be returned by 7 p.m. on November 21st. So keep that in mind. Now, for those who don't want to do early voting or forget or whatever, on Election Day, which again will be the 21st of this month, you can visit your assigned polling location anytime from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and cast your ballot, excuse me. Only polling locations that serve voters with runoff elections will actually be open that day. So obviously that makes a lot of sense. So that's the details on that. If I went too fast for you, besides rewinding the podcast, you can also click the link in the show notes and head on over. I think I got these details, yes, from WCBD News 2, and you can see all those details on their website. Of course, you can also go to chsvotes.gov or scvotes.gov to look for polling locations, to see all the dates and times I just mentioned. So plenty of ways to go ahead and find that information if you missed it. But again, really got to hammer home that point. I know not every election comes down to one vote like the one I talked about before. But it just shows how important voting is. And you never know, is this an election where my one vote really could have made a difference? You just don't know. So I encourage you all to, I know it feels like we're always voting. It seems like it's always so important. And runoffs, you're like, I just voted. I got to do this again. I take time out of my day. I get it, but it's incredibly important. So be sure to go ahead and vote, whether you do it early or in person on November 21st. All right, and our non-election story has to do with Mount Pleasant. On November 6th, Mount Pleasant's Economic Development Committee declared an economic disaster due to the dumping of imported shrimp into U.S. markets. The decision was unanimous among the 3 committee members that were present at the meeting. Before voting on the resolution, the committee heard from a few people within the industry, including Brian Jones, who is a first-generation shrimper from McClellanville and is the vice president of the South Carolina Shrimpers Association. Jones said that imported shrimp have flooded the market, making it hard for local shrimpers to make ends meet. Because of this influx of imported shrimp, domestic shrimpers, whether they're here in Charleston or beyond, are struggling to get a fair price, if they could even sell their inventory at all. They're not making as much profit if they do sell, so it's been really tough for them. This declaration won't result in any disaster relief assistance directly, but folks like Jones hopes that it'll at least raise awareness among consumers about the struggles that shrimpers in their community are facing, and will eventually result in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration declaring a fishery disaster for domestic shrimpers. So somewhat of a symbolic move by declaring this emergency. But again, it's just hopeful that this will raise the profile of this issue, and maybe if other cities across this state and beyond are having issues and enough of them declare a disaster, hopefully on the federal level they can step in and we can get some help. Now, federal recognition may lead to relief in the forms of either funding or loan assistance to help update, repair, and maintain boats and equipment. So it's not going to necessarily just be here's some money, but it will help them just offset some costs that maybe they would have to do themselves, make things a little easier for them. Now, the town of Mount Pleasant is just the second town in the state to declare an economic disaster for shrimpers. McClellanville was the first. So we'll see if there's any updates to that as far as other cities and towns, and if the federal government decides to step in. But that's where they're at right now, and I just think it's an important story, and I encourage you to check the link in the show notes to just get some more information. A lot of people, they want local, whether it's shrimp or fish or, vegetables, fruit, whatever it may be. People want to have local purveyors be able to make money, and they want to, when they eat out at restaurants, a lot of people like restaurants that support those local businesses. If they aren't able to compete with, shrimpers outside of the U.S., it's going to be really tough, especially with, as we know, inflation and business costs and things like that. As much as these restaurants and things may want to help out local shrimpers, they might just not be able to economically to survive. And although that would certainly stink, it's hard to blame them when you're running a business. Sometimes you just have to do things like that. So again, just something to keep an eye on. And I think it was something I didn't even know was going on until I caught this story in the Post and Courier. So I encourage you all to look into it some more. That'll do it for this episode of Holy City Center Radio. So happy to be back with you after essentially the week off from doing shows, and looking forward to coming back and doing it 2 more times this week as normal. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. And you can also help out by liking, leaving reviews, rating, whatever you can do on your platform. All that stuff helps raise the profile of this show and can hopefully get it into the ears of some other folks. I want to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every single episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show as well. Can't wait to talk to you all again on Wednesday. Until then, good night and good luck.